Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a video for you about this little guy right here. This is the Serge Panchenko Rook Pocketknife. Really weird custom little knife. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do this in the format I've been doing lately that's kind of been working, where I go ahead, I do a disassembly for you, and then I'm going to give you my thoughts on the piece. Two pieces of warning. First off, this guy was loaned my way by Serge Panchenko. He sent it my way, said, Nick, do you want to check one of these guys out? I said, absolutely, yes. So he sent it along. We do have to assume this is the very best quality controlled one of these guys ever, although they are custom built by him, so we kind of have to assume that generally. And I'm doing my best not to let that affect the nature of the quality of my review. And I'm also going to not be giving this back to him. As soon as I finish this video, I'm going to contact him and tell him that I'm buying the damn knife, as was offered to me as an option. But anyways, I wanted to put that out there. So what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to start off by doing a disassembly of the knife. And I'm going to be honest with you. This terrifies me a little bit. I have not taken this knife apart. I am going into this completely blind, and I'm doing that for your personal edification. But the thing that is terrifying about this is that this is a very unique mechanism here, right? We have two things going on here. We have the Hawk toggle detent and a Hawk lock right here. This is not a sliding bar lock in the classic sense, right? You can see that there's no bar here that is visible underneath there. And in fact, there is no lock bar in a classical sense. It's not a liner lock or anything like that. There's no detent ball. Instead, this is a whole different situation. And it's a kind of knife that I really haven't worked on much before. So I'm really interested to see what this is going to look like once I take it apart. But, yeah, you're going to be here with me together doing this because I have no idea what I'm getting into. So, I suspect this is going to be a very long video. So go on ahead and buckle up, grab some coffee, buckle up. If you're in a car, go ahead and buckle up. And then we will, we'll take it from there. So, to give you my initial thoughts on how I'm going to approach this. I know the pivot's going to have to come out, and I suspect that I'm going to have to take off this scale here to get the some screw that screws into the other side, and then that will allow me, once the pivot is out, to take off this side here. I think this is going to come up with the scale, and that's going to be fine, but we're going to find out together. So I'm going to go ahead and start off by taking off the clip here. Serge sent me in a little kind of document thing explaining the knife, mentioned that he really just doesn't care for milled clips and that finds this approach better. I can kind of see that in some situations. A really good bent clip can have a lot of benefits, but also I think a lot of people, by the way, just as a warning, this knife is going to be about $1,000 if you buy it because it is a custom style knife. Looks like we are looking at a T8 here, maybe? At $1,000, that's a little bit more problematic. I'm wondering, yeah, this is requiring a little bit of torque here. So what I'm going to go on ahead and do, given that it is a relatively, well, pricey knife, is I'm going to go ahead and bust out my torquey sort of set here. This gives me a little bit torquey. By the way, nickshabazz.com/tools if you're trying to get something better than torquey set out of me, but this should give me a little bit more torque, there you go, to be able to get that loose, and just makes it a little bit more reliable to do so. Once I broke the thread locker, which feels like there was some thread locker in there, I can come back in with the actual screwdriver here. But this should remove the pivot. Yeah, we can see there was a little bit of thread locker on that pivot. So now we're going to get our first glimpse inside. And okay, so I believe this to be our detent mechanism, and I believe this spring is going to go flying off someplace shortly. So I am going to try and prevent that. I am going to see if I can't get this spring out of here in a way that is not going to hit me in the Batman mask. So I've gone ahead and I've kind of impaled it on this little dude here, and that way it remained solid and there. So what I bet's going to happen here is that when I open this blade, you're going to see this area here. Remember, the spring goes in here. So when I open the blade, you're going to see that it has to kind of compress that spring a little bit to open, right? This is the toggle detent, right? This is completely different from the lock, right? But when this knife is closed, the spring is under some compression, right? And in order to open the knife, you need to compress that spring further for it to come open. So this is a separate kind of detent. And then once the knife is fully popped open, you can see it toggles over one direction or the other, right? So that's how this detent is working. The detent is completely independent of the locking mechanism here. So now that I've popped this open, as I had predicted, I am able to get to some internal screws right here. Do I want to take these pieces out? Well, they came out anyways, so yes, I do. I'm going to put those over here, and I'll put this spring over here, because I suspect there are more springs in the offing here. So there is one little post that is on the blade here. And now it looks like I should be able to remove these two, which look like T8 screws. Are they T8 screws? They are. So I'll go ahead and I will remove this internal screw and remove this internal screw. And that should allow me to lift this scale right off. Oh God, every one of those pins is loose. So remember these pins in the back here? Yeah, every one of those is loose. So, yeah. Yeah, this may be the play here. I'm just going to keep all these pins down here in the corner here. Hopefully pull those out. This is a little more complicated than some. It's a nice touch, but also, oof. Okay, Rook 2023, pop that open, good. We see this is running on washers. I'm sorry, on bearings, that is. And there are stainless steel washers underneath the bearings that go up against the titanium, so there's that. This knife has actually been carried, where did, okay, there went the pivot. These are my two internal screws. Yes, because my clip screws are up there. Okay, good. This means then that I should be able to unscrew this screw here and get access to the lock mechanism. Okay, excellent. I can put my bearings over here. Just had to get my bearings. Okay, and then this little guy goes here. And there we go. Okay. So we'll put those off to the side. Now I've got my blade out and free, and we see here that although the whole thing is acid etched, and by the way, this has gotten a fair amount of carry. I have been ridiculously busy, but I'm always able to carry stuff, so that's nice at least. But yeah, I'm able to pop this guy loose, and I'll go ahead and clean up the blade here while I've got that moment. And I'll go ahead and use a little Q-tip here, covered with some rubbing alcohol to get up in there. Nice. Okay. Now, because curiosity killed the cat, or in this case the jackass, I want to see what's underneath this, right? Because the locking mechanism, in fact, when I... Hold on. It may actually be more simple than I'm thinking about. This locking mechanism here seems to engage with this. Yeah, because this right here, this little piece slides... Oh, okay, I see how this works. So this little piece here, when the knife is locked open, stays right there. And then when it's locked open, it's unable to move, and so therefore the knife is locked. When I retract this, it allows this little piece here to kind of come up through this little gap here and land over here. It offers no natural detent, which is why they're using the Hawk toggle detent on the other side. But yeah, so then underneath here, there should just be a plate with a little thumb disc on it, and then probably a coil spring underneath it that's keeping that there. And because curiosity killed the jackass, here we are. Let's go ahead and pop this loose. I'm going to be a little careful here because there is a spring in play. Oh boy. Oh, actually, that's nice. We see here is the spring. I'm going to put my thumb on top of it. And so when we slide this back, we're just compressing this spring. Whoa there. Okay. You know what? I could pop this metal piece out, but I don't feel a strong need to. Whoa there. It's happening. Okay, never mind. It happened. All right. So, yeah, we got our spring here. We got our little area where this lock slides. And then we got two more screws here that we don't really need to remove. Hi, spring. Good to see you. And, yeah. So, all of that is that. And I'm going to go ahead and put this side back together. Because, well, here, I'll clean it off while it's open. Yeah, there doesn't need to be a whole lot of love going on there. So let's go on ahead and put this guy back in here. And I'm going to use this here. Let me make sure it slides happily. Yep, sure does. Okay, and let me screw this little screw back in here. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use some blue thread locker here. This is a little bit more involved than a lot of my disassemblies, but honestly, it ain't so bad. I've been through much, much worse. It's weird, but it's not bad. The little pins are probably going to be a pain in my neck, but maybe they won't be. We'll see. Sorry you get the great view there, but I'm trying to hold this down with a spring, and this is one of those days where you wish you were an octopus, as I'm sure everybody feels on a regular and ongoing basis. Moving on. So, we've got this guy back together here. Got that working. We are actually pretty much good to go here. I'll go ahead and just clean those areas off just in case. But, yeah, we're looking about set here. So let's start reassembling this knife. And how do I want to do that? Oh, let me clean this part off here as well. Yeah. Okay, step one is probably going to be to put this pivot back in. You can see how the pivot here is keyed, so it cannot rotate freely. That's always a nice thing to see. We can also see that the pivot is slightly out of alignment. It doesn't want to go through there because, well, I took everything out of alignment here. So let me just do a little bit of rotate, rotate, rotate here. There we go. And we're through. And importantly, it has dropped down into the hole there. So we're good to go here. Now I see from the thing here, we need to put a washer here. Come here, washer. Get in there. This was originally, when I got it running fairly dry. Out of respect for that, I'm going to try not to Exxon Shabazz it too bad. He says, there you go. I'm just going to put that in there. Oh, yeah, let me clean off the bearings real quick. That might bear on the action a little bit. These are using stainless steel bearings as opposed to ceramic. Not certainly the end of any worlds, just interesting. So there is that. There's the bearing in place. I think my pivot actually fell out and down, but that's okay. I'll make sure it lands on one of the honeycomb bits here. Okay, so now, I'm just kind of trying to take stock of what's going on. I don't have to worry about any of these bits up here. That's good. I think I can just drop the blade in. Let me go ahead and put a little bit of lubrication on the inside of the blade here. Put that there. This is so profoundly different from most of the knives that we deal with on a regular basis in the community. I have to respect that, right? This is a rare bird, so to speak. That was a Rook joke, of course. But anyways, so as a result, you know, that's kind of neat. It's different. It's fun to have something that is off the beaten path, even when I have seen so damn much. And in fact, you can consider that to be a source of bias here, right? I am so very, very, very deeply tired. Well, actually, just generally as a person. But more importantly, I'm really tired of yet another frame lock flipper sort of situation, right? And I think Serge was too. He kind of said directly in the materials that he wanted to not make another freaking frame lock. And so he did. He made something that is very much not another freaking frame lock here. And I gotta respect that. I gotta appreciate that, right? This is different. It is unique. The knife that is closest to it is the Serge Panchenko and Hawk Knives. Whoa, go figure. Serge Panchenko and Hawk Knives did this too. But it is the Orbit, which was another cleaver-style knife with a Hawk style, like the innards of it. I never got a chance to take one apart, but the appeal, the approach was very similar to this. I only had one briefly, and that was actually as a proxy for a sale at one point in time, way, way, way back when, early in the history of the channel, where there were two jackasses who I gather didn't trust each other much, but trusted me, which kind of weird, but okay. But they sent a pair of knives my way, and I looked at both of them and said, yep, they're knives. And then they went ahead and sent them along. So that was interesting. But that was my only chance to handle a Rook here. Okay, what am I forgetting here? Obviously, there's no detent at this stage. The knife locks open just fine, to be clear. The knife locks, but that's because all the locking stuff is under this scale. The detent stuff is over here. And so right now, being careful not to guillotine my fingers, the knife is, well, it locks. closes. So that's cool. Also note the stop pin here is actually this thumb disc, which isn't really a thumb disc. You can't really open the knife with it. So do keep that in mind. But okay, let's go ahead and keep things kind of arranged that way. Now what I got to do is drop in these individual pieces of metal here. This is either going to be straightforward or it's going to suck, and I just don't know which. I'm going to use this little watch spring bar tool to help me kind of align them and pop them into place on the other side here. We will see how effective I can be at that. Oh, there's one. Okay, good. One down, about 1 billion to go. 2, excellent. 3. At least they are all the same size, he says optimistically, believing for just a moment that they are all the same size. Maybe. Yep, you're in. Good. Another one. Number 4 goes in. But yeah, this reminds me a lot of the Orbit, which was a nice knife, but in a lot of ways, and given, I can't compare the two things directly because there's been a whole lot of time in my life since that era, since I managed to take a look at that, right? Yeah, but this feels better to me. I think I like the size a little more. But I also really like this knife, partly because, as I mentioned, it is so different than what's out there. Okay, so all of these are in place now, happily. Everything else should be good to go. So what I want to do is reassemble this detent. So we put that guy here, right? I'm going to put that there. I'm going to put the toggle bit right in here. And now what I'm going to do is try and put this spring in place. Why is this just a really strong spring? That is a really stiff spring. Oh, boy. How am I going to make this a thing? I need to give it the maximum extension first. Okay. This is the part of the... We have just entered the danger zone. Because I am putting a lot of pressure on a small spring. Oh, come on, get in there, you little bastard. There we go. You're in. Okay, beautiful. I believe that's going to be good to go. I am not going to tempt fate by opening it with this thing. Yeah, okay, good. It looks like we're popped into place here. Everything's in position. I am going to go on ahead, although the brass and steel shouldn't really super need it. I'm going to put a little bit of lubrication in there. Just to, you know, make things a little easier. I don't know who it's making things easier for, but it makes me feel better. And at the end of the day, isn't that why we're in this hobby? If it doesn't make you feel better, then what are we doing? Right? Not that it'll make you feel better in some grand kind of way, but it'll just make you feel a little bit, you know, you got something cool, right? There's a source of... Uh-oh. Speaking of not sources of joy, that spring is getting a little unruly here. So let me get this clip in right quick here before that spring decides to get, oh boy. Okay, get in there. Make sure this is aligned, get in there. Okay, now I'll tighten that up later, but for the moment I gotta get the pivot in position here. Now we're gonna take our pivot here, which is back to a T8. Put this together. And let me tighten this down here. Okay, so now we are back to dead center. It's actually running even smoother than it was before. Let me tighten those clip screws here. And is there any blade play? No? No. Only 19 minutes. Holy crap, people. I really expected this to be an odyssey. I expected this to be one of those where it's like 6 hours later and my wife's in bed saying, honey, when are you coming home? And I'm going to be like, no, I'm still disassembling the hawk. But no, this turned out to be remarkably, well, okay, maybe not remarkably easy, but it was sure pretty straightforward, given the weirdity of everything involved. So now we enter the portion of the review where I tell you my thoughts on the knife. And my thoughts on the knife are simultaneously three big things. One, this is expensive, oh my God. A grand for a knife like this feels a little bit wild, right? And that is, by every measure, the bad. Right? This is a lot of money. It is also custom made, right? It is made in the USA by Serge Panchenko. He does a lot of stuff that's being made overseas, but this is one of the ones he's making. And he's specific in his little document that all the parts he's buying are made in the USA too. So this is made by a very, very famous custom knife maker. Right? Serge has been around for a long, long time, right? He even makes watches at this point in time. Do not get into watches. But, yeah, it's custom made by Serge Panchenko, which is going to command a premium in and of itself, but that doesn't change the fact that this is a lot of money. And if this was something that were being made overseas, and mind you, I don't think this lock style and such is not stuff you get very readily from a random, overseas factory, that would be very suspect. And it is a lot, right? It's one of those things where you absolutely have to be in love with this knife for that price to make any, even the smallest amount of sense, right? You have to love Serge, the design. You have to love the weirdness of the toggle detent as well as of the regular thing. You really, really do have to love every element of this, or else that price doesn't make sense. And so if you're looking at this with anything other than, oh my God, I need one, then you don't need one, right? This is probably not going to be worth it for you. So that's my first thought, is simultaneously, it is very expensive. The next thought is, oh my God, this is unusual. As I've mentioned, this has so many things that are unusual. The blade shape itself, right? In addition to just shouting Serge Panchenko at the top of its damn lungs, right? This blade is unusual. It works well, mind you. It is well done. It is reasonably well ground. It comes down to a reasonably thin edge here, and the steel itself is CPM 20 CV, and Serge specifies that it's run at 62 Rockwell, which is nothing to scoff at, right? And it is an absolutely fine knife, but the blade on it is a little bit unusual. Then the handle on it is also a little bit unusual. When you put the whole damn thing together, this thing is absolutely bizarre just from an aesthetic perspective. But then you add in the other weird stuff, right? Like this kind of a floating metal backspacer thing is just not common. That's kind of a shame. It's actually a cool effect, right? I kind of like that. The detent on this guy, the toggle detent, is very unusual, right? It feels very different relative to your detent on your average frame lock knife. Here is an example. Actually, this is maybe a bad example of an average frame lock, but this is a Holt Knives Morpheus. Yeah, but like compared to your average frame lock, come here, average frame lock. Do I really not have an average frame lock on the table right now? Oh man, the world has gotten so much nicer not having an average frame lock. Okay, average frame lock. A little knife by concept here. This is the Anomaly, which is actually amusingly not at all an anomaly, being a Chinese-made flipper frame lock. That is, as fact, as non-anomalous for 2023 as possible. But anyways, there have been a million things like this. There has been one thing like this, and that's pretty cool. And I gotta say, having the flipper tab up here is weird. It's unusual, and it requires a slightly different finger method than otherwise. You can't push it out like this. You really do have to light switch this. It is very toggle feeling. But in that sense, it is very satisfying. It feels like a switch. This is not a thumb stud, as a reminder. You may be able to, depending on the nature of your fingers, use the groove in the blade to pop this guy open, but with my relatively small hands, that ain't working. But this is a very compelling action. It feels great. It's very fidgety, right? The toggle detent is very nice. The closing mechanism, when you do this, the knife just completely drops shut. And you do have to push it closed, by the way, right? The toggle detent here, you require a little bit of force to get from here to there. So you do have to do that, but most of the time, centripetal force is more than enough to pull this guy in, right? That's a beautiful thing. It is so much unlike everything else that's going on right now. that I am very, very in favor of it, right? It eschews a number of the really interesting, really uninteresting things in favor of some really interesting things. And so in that domain, this is itself just awesome. It is so unusual relative to what's going on most of the time that even for a seasoned knife person, I take this out and I'm like, oh, that's very different. And I like that a lot. And then finally, the other thing I have to comment on about this is, we've talked about, and, to be clear, there were some other practical things that are relevant here. Like I said, it's a good blade for cutting. The ergonomics on it are fine. This is clearly something that is not meant to, this part's maybe a little bit high, etc. It works just fine. It's okay in the hand. It's very heavy, unfortunately. I mean, we can talk about that kind of thing too, but we're looking at here, 4.6 ounces for, how much blade are we talking? Feels like about 3 inches of blade. Yeah, so it's a heavy boy, right? And it's a little bit big. It's a little bit big toward the top, etc. This is a little bit weird. It's kind of a pocket pecker, but it's kind of out of line with everything else. It's a pocket weirder is what this thing is. Anyways, but the thing that is kind of most, I think, interesting in some ways for this, if you are a seasoned knife collector, that is, you're a knife collector and somebody has thrown a bunch of tarragon at you, get it? Seasoning? Okay, anyways, is the pedigree of this knife, right? This is a knife that is doing a bunch of things that are going to be interesting to high-end knife collectors, if you like Serge and if you like the Hawks, right? Serge, as I mentioned, is a designer who has been in this business a long time, has a, he's very famous in the community, I'd say, for very good reasons, right? And he's, frankly, a nice dude, independently of anything else, right? But Serge himself carries a fair amount of cachet in this community, and this is very much Serge. It's part of the reason I went with this particular configuration. It doesn't look very jewelry-like, which is my normal approach, but this feels very Serge, right? Kind of the distressed titanium on the distressed metal. I mean, it's 50 Shades of Grey for sure, except, this actually respects consent. Anyways, moving on. But this is a very interesting sort of thing in that it is prototypically Serge, but then you combine Serge, who's a very well-known knife maker, and this is very much in his vein with the Hawks, G&G Hawk. This is, by the way, the same Hawks who did like the Chris Reeve tie lock, who do the Hawk lock. This is the same Hawks of the Hawk deadbolt. Hold on, where are you at, deadbolt? Might as well put that on the screen, because why not? So, the same Hawks as this guy right here. So they are also in the upper echelons of weird and custom knife making. And so to combine these two mechanisms designed by the Hawks, the two, of course, being the lock and the toggle detent, with the design from Serge, makes this very, very unique. All of this, you might think to yourself, Nick, you're just justifying a high price. And at some level, I am. But more importantly, I think I'm justifying why a lot of people are going to pay it. Because if you don't like the Hawks, if you don't like Serge, you're not going to want this knife to start with, right? This could be 20 bucks and you'd be like, oh, no, absolutely not, right? If you are a collector who doesn't really know who they are but wants something very different, this could be very interesting to you. Whether it's a grand worth of interesting to you, that's a separate question, right? That's a different one entirely. But it could actually be interesting to somebody who just wants something that is so incredibly far from the beaten path and that is, practically speaking, incredibly well made. Like, fit and finish here is bonkers good. Everything works really well. The details are there. I mean, look at the terracing of these 3 levels here. I mean, there is enough here that you could appreciate this even if you don't know who Serge and the Hawks are. So, ultimately, though, it's going to come down to what are your priorities here. If you want a very, very unique knife by 2 very, very unique, well, by Serge primarily, but featuring mechanisms from 2 very, very unique knife designers, this is in some ways a piece of knife making. Oh, God, that's the most pretentious damn thing. A piece of knife making history! Hoi, oi, oi. But nevertheless, this could be viewed in that way, right? This is the crystallization of 2 really interesting knife makers collaborating together in a one-off custom sort of platform. That could be enough. The weirdness of it could be enough, and for other people, nothing's going to be enough, and this isn't going to be interesting. So ultimately, coming down to an actual judgment on this is very hard, because it's like, for a lot of people, this is dead in the water. For a lot of people, this is, oh my God, yes, get me one. And for a lot of people, they're just going to be scratching your head, right? And for me, honestly, getting this guy, when Serge reached out, like, I know I like Serge. I think his stuff is interesting. This was a weird piece. I'm like, sure, why not? Let's check it out. I was not sure how I was going to land on it, but I have carried this knife. I have carried this knife a lot, and it has that lovely, just like, oh yeah, that is a nice feeling right there. This open and close algorithm is just spectacular. It is a very nice, just daily tool. It works well. It comes nice and sharp, as it, of course, needs to at a freaking grand, right? But it is a good blade. It works well. The size is great for me. I do like the size a lot. I just freaking, by the way, size comparison, Spyderco. This is just a really cool knife. And so even though I thought at the start, like, a grand, I don't know, got a lot of stuff I want to buy for a grand. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. So, anyways, I guess that's my conclusion, right? For a lot of people, this will make 0 sense. For some people, it might be interesting, but maybe not $1,000 interesting. And for some people, yeah, yep, absolutely, yep. And if you are a fan of Serge, you're a fan of the Hawks, or you're just a fan of unusual and unique custom knife making, this is probably something you should consider. And if you're not, then move on and find something else. And don't worry, next video is going to be on something a little bit cheaper. Anyways, there you go. I hope this has been interesting to you, that you're having a wonderful day, and most of all, that this review didn't feel like a rookie mistake. Have a good one, everybody. Bye now.